The winter wind rattled the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, carrying with it the damp chill that often settled over the Windsor estate. Inside, the warmth of the family home felt like a fragile shield against a world that was about to irrevocably change. For Prince William, the morning of January 16, 2024, had begun with the usual chaos that defined life with three young children: the scramble for school uniforms, the gentle cajoling to finish breakfast, and the pitter-patter of little feet on the wooden floors. It was the kind of controlled disorder that he and his wife, Catherine, had grown to cherish. It was real, it was theirs, and it was normal. But normality, William was about to learn, was a luxury that could be snatched away in the quiet delivery of a medical report. Catherine had been scheduled for planned abdominal surgery. The palace had released the standard vague statement that such procedures were routine, and the couple had worked hard to keep the atmosphere at home light and reassuring for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and the irrepressible Prince Louis. They had sat the children down in the cozy sitting room, the one with the slightly battered sofas that were perfect for family movie nights, and explained that Mummy needed to go to the hospital to let the doctors help her tummy get better. They had kept the explanation simple, positive, and brief, just as they always tried to do with the difficult conversations. As William helped Catherine into the car that would take them to the London clinic, he squeezed her hand. He was the rock, the steady presence. He had learned that role from a lifetime of practice, and from walking behind his mother's coffin as a 15-year-old boy, forced to hide his grief from the world's cameras. He knew how to project calm when his insides were churning. He saw the flicker of apprehension in Catherine's eyes, the same eyes that had captivated him on a university catwalk over 2 decades ago, and he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "It's just a procedure," the look was meant to convey. "You'll be home before we know it, and we'll pick up right where we left off." The first few days were precisely as they had planned. Catherine's recovery began, and the initial reports from her medical team were positive. William divided his time between hospital visits, and where he would sit by her bedside and update her on the minor dramas of the household, like Louis's latest attempt to build a tower that rivaled the one at Windsor Castle, and the school run. He threw himself into the domestic routine with a determination that surprised even himself. He, the heir to the throne, was now the primary chef, the chief organizer of playdates, and the master of the packed lunch. There was something grounding about it, a way to maintain control in a situation that was inherently uncontrollable. His father, King Charles III, had also been admitted to the hospital for a planned procedure, adding another layer of concern, though that situation also seemed at first to be manageable. William began to feel the tension in his shoulders ease just slightly. The rug beneath his feet, which had felt a little wrinkled, seemed to be smoothing out. He and Catherine spoke on video calls each evening. He would hold the phone up to show her the children's artwork, and she would laugh at his slightly singed attempt to bake, reminding him to set a timer. It was in those moments, seeing her smile from a hospital bed, that he allowed himself to believe that the worst was behind them. He whispered to a close friend on the phone one night, "She's tough. She's the toughest person I know. We've got this." He had no idea that the rug was about to be violently ripped out from under him, sending him into a free-fall for which no amount of royal training could have prepared him. The day the world changed for Prince William did not arrive with a thunderclap, but with a quiet, dreaded certainty that turned his blood to ice. And Catherine had been home from the hospital for a little over 2 weeks. The family had settled into a tentative rhythm of recovery. She was resting, the children were at school, and life was cautiously beginning to feel normal again. William had allowed himself a moment of relief, perhaps even a fleeting thought about the engagements he would soon resume. He was in his study, reviewing papers, when Catherine appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, her expression not one of pain, but of a shock so profound it seemed to have drained all the color from the world. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quiet, yet it cut through the silence of the room like a shard of glass. She walked towards him, clutching her phone. The results from the post-operative tests had come back. The biopsy had revealed the presence of cancer. And the words fell from her lips, clinical and horrifying. Cancer. Preventative chemotherapy. William later told a friend that in that single, suspended moment, it was as if the ground beneath him vanished. He stood up, walked to her, and held her. He didn't speak because there were no words. He simply held her as she trembled, his mind reeling, trying to process the seismic shift that had just occurred in their lives. The routine surgery, the recovery period, the vague palace statements, it all now had a terrifying new context. For William, the initial shock was quickly replaced by a maelstrom of emotions he had rarely, if ever, allowed himself to feel. There was, first and foremost, the primal fear. This was Catherine. This was his wife, the mother of his children, the woman who had been the axis around which his world had spun for over 2 decades. The thought of a world without her was not just painful, it was inconceivable. It was an abyss he could not look into. This fear was closely followed by a crushing sense of helplessness. He was the Prince of Wales, a man who had been groomed his entire life to handle duty, crisis, and public expectation. He could face a room of hostile press. He could negotiate complex political landscapes, but he could not fight this enemy. He could not take this illness from her. He could only stand by and watch the woman he worshipped face the battle of her life. The fear and helplessness were intertwined with a deep, searing heartbreak. It wasn't just for himself, but for her. He thought of all the plans they had made, the future they had envisioned, at the simple joys of watching their children grow up. He thought of her vibrancy, her love for life, her unwavering optimism. The thought of her enduring the brutal regimen of chemotherapy, of seeing her strength sapped and her spirit tested, was a physical blow. A friend who spoke to him during this time described witnessing heartbreak, fear, and helplessness all at once in his eyes, noting the way he held himself, as if bracing for a constant, invisible assault. But there was no time to crumble. The news was a private hell, but it was a hell they had to navigate with 3 young children who knew nothing yet. William and Catherine sat together in their bedroom, the door closed, and made a plan. They would tell the children. They would do it together, as they had always done everything. They would be honest. But they would also be their anchor. The conversation they had with Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis a short time later was, by far, the hardest thing William had ever had to do. They gathered the children in the same sitting room where they had promised Mummy would be home soon. This time, the promise was different. Catherine, with William's hand firmly on her back for support, told them that Mummy was ill, that she would have to have some strong medicine to get better, but that she was going to be okay. They focused on the positive, on the certainty of her recovery, because they had to. For the children, for themselves, they had to believe it. In the days that followed, William took over. He threw himself into the role of protector with a ferocity that surprised even his closest aides. And with no live-in staff at Adelaide Cottage, he personally took charge of the school run, standing on the windswept playground with the other parents, a man carrying the weight of the world, making small talk about homework and half-term. He cooked meals that often went uneaten, organized play dates to keep the children distracted, and became the family's emotional buffer, absorbing their anxieties so Catherine could focus on healing. The world outside was buzzing with conspiracy theories and speculation about Catherine's absence, a cacophony of noise that felt like a personal insult. William was incandescent with rage at the intrusion, but he channeled that rage into action. He became a wall between his family and the storm, a silent, steadfast guardian fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against a disease and one against a world hungry for details. It was love in its rawest, most powerful, and most desperate form. The decision to share their truth with the world was not made lightly. It was born of necessity, a desperate attempt to reclaim their narrative from the jaws of speculation and to protect their children from the relentless, ugly tide of rumors. For weeks, Catherine had been the subject of a firestorm of online conspiracy theories. Her absence from public life, following her surgery, had created a vacuum that was filled with outlandish and often cruel conjecture. The situation had become unbearable. The final straw for Catherine, however, was not the cruel comments about herself, but the breach of trust in a place that was meant to be safe. In late March, news broke that staff at the London clinic, the very hospital where she had been treated, had allegedly attempted to access her private medical records. It was a gross violation, an intrusion into the most intimate details of her health. For Catherine, the decision to speak publicly was an act of profound courage and a strategic move to take control. She had seen the outpouring of public support for the king when he had been open about his own cancer diagnosis. She believed, with a quiet conviction, that her experience could help others facing similar terrifying moments. It was also, critically, a way to put a stop to the chatter for the sake of her children. She did not want George, Charlotte, and Louis to grow up and one day read the vile speculation about their mother's health. She wanted them to hear the truth from her. With William by her side, but she began to work on a personal statement. Her sister Pippa was enlisted to help craft the words, to ensure they were honest, dignified, and came from the heart. William's role in this process was that of a silent guardian. He watched as his wife, who was dealing with the physical and emotional toll of her diagnosis and the start of her treatment, summoned the strength to address the world. He saw her sit on a wooden bench in a garden, surrounded by the hopeful yellow of spring daffodils, a deliberate choice of backdrop that was a world away from the sterile chaos of the rumors. He saw her, dressed in a simple striped jumper and jeans, transform into a figure of grace under unimaginable pressure. The video was recorded in absolute secrecy by a BBC special events team. On the day it was to be broadcast, the atmosphere at Windsor was thick with tension. A senior courtier later recalled the feeling. Everyone knew it was a huge moment. It was incredibly emotional. When the message was aired on the 6 o'clock news, it felt as though the world stood still. Catherine, with a calmness that belied the storm within, spoke of the huge shock the diagnosis had been. She spoke of the incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family. She spoke directly to others battling cancer, offering them solidarity and hope. And then, she spoke of William. In her message, the subtext was clear. She was not alone. By her side, throughout every grueling moment, had been her husband. The broadcast was a seismic event. It silenced the critics, quieted the conspiracy theorists, and brought an outpouring of global support. But for William, watching his wife bare her soul to millions, it was not a public relations victory. It was a moment of profound, private awe. He was witnessing the extraordinary strength of the woman he loved, a strength that he had always known was there, but which now shone with a brilliance that eclipsed everything else. In that moment, any doubt he had about her recovery vanished. If anyone could beat this, she could. And he would be right there, holding her hand, every step of the way. While Catherine began the grueling physical battle against the disease, Prince William waged a war of his own. A silent domestic war fought in the quiet hours of the morning and the long, lonely stretches of the night. Their home, once a haven of laughter and chaos, became a place of hushed voices and carefully managed emotions. William became the family's operational manager, a role he embraced with a quiet desperation. He woke before dawn to prepare for the school run, ensuring that George, Charlotte, and Louis had as normal a routine as possible. He stood on the sidelines of sports days and attended school plays, a solitary figure in the crowd, his face a mask of calm while his mind was consumed with the battle raging at home. The simple, brutal reality of Catherine's treatment took its toll. There were days when she was too weak to get out of bed, days when the side effects of the chemotherapy left her exhausted and defeated. On those days, William was her nurse, her cheerleader, and her rock. He would bring her tea, sit with her in silence, and hold her when the tears came. He shielded the children from the worst of it, on inventing games and activities to keep them occupied and happy. He became a master of deflection, turning their concerns into distractions, their fears into adventures. A close friend revealed the depth of his commitment. His devotion to her never wavered. He's been by her side every step, and the depth of his devotion is something that stays with you. It's love in its rawest, most powerful form. Amidst the clinical routine of hospital visits and the emotional toll of watching his wife suffer, William also became her partner in a different kind of healing, one rooted in the natural world. Catherine, who had always found solace in the outdoors, immersed herself in the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. She believed deeply in the ability of nature to heal, not just the body, but the mind and spirit. On her better days, William would take her to the quieter, more secluded corners of the Windsor estate. They would walk slowly through ancient woodlands, the sunlight dappling through the canopy, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the birdsong. They would sit by a stream or simply stand in silence, breathing in the fresh, earthy air. A friend explained, having that mantra definitely helped the family connect during her treatment because they were able to spend so much time together, and getting outside in nature was a huge factor in her recovery. For William, these moments were sacred. They were a respite from the fear and the pressure, a reminder that there was still beauty and peace in the world. He saw the color slowly returning to Catherine's cheeks, not just from the medicine, but from the healing power of the natural world they both loved. He saw her spirit rekindle as they watched the children run through the fields, their laughter echoing in the clean air. It was in those moments, away from the palaces and the press, that their bond deepened in a way that transcended their roles as prince and princess. They were simply a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, fighting the hardest fight of their lives together, finding strength in each other and in the quiet, enduring power of the land they were sworn to protect. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was now tempered by a resilient, quiet hope. They were not just surviving, they were learning to live again, one forest walk at a time. The news of Catherine's remission, announced in early 2025, was met with a wave of public celebration. But for Prince William, it was a moment of intensely private, overwhelming relief. It was the end of a long, dark tunnel they had navigated together, hand in hand. The rug that had been pulled from under him had been slowly, painstakingly laid back in place, not by doctors or palace aides, but by the unbreakable bond he shared with his wife. The experience had fundamentally altered him. The fear and helplessness he had felt had forged in him a new kind of strength, a deeper appreciation for the fragility of life, and an unshakable resolve to protect his family at all costs. For Catherine, the journey through illness had been transformative. The woman who emerged from it was the same graceful, dedicated princess, but with an added layer of profound depth and resilience. Her focus on early childhood development, always a passion, now seemed even more poignant, informed by the primal need to nurture and protect. Her appreciation for the simple healing power of nature had become a core part of her being. The public saw it in her gradual return to duties, in the gentle confidence of her smile, in the way she looked at her husband with an even deeper sense of shared history and love. Their relationship, forged in the fires of this trial, emerged stronger than ever. The friend who had spoken of William's heartbreak now spoke of a couple whose love had been emboldened. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, their most frightened, and their most determined. They had weathered the storm not by putting on a brave face for the cameras, but by being utterly, completely real with each other in the privacy of their home. The playful glances and shared jokes at public events were now underpinned by a gravity that only those who have faced the abyss together can understand. The 6 parts of their story, from the initial shock in the quiet of Adelaide Cottage to the triumphant announcement of remission, are not just a royal chronicle. They are a testament to the enduring power of partnership. The title, What Prince William Told His Princess Catherine That Left Her Surprised, hints at a single moment, but the reality is far grander. It was not one thing he said, but everything he did. He told her, through his actions, that she was not alone. He told her, through his silent strength, that her battle was his battle. He told her in the darkest of times that his love for her was not a fairy tale notion, but a force as real and as powerful as the disease they fought. In the end, the greatest surprise for Catherine was perhaps not a single utterance, but the discovery that in the man she married, she had found a partner capable of a love so deep, so fierce, and so unwavering that it could, quite simply, move mountains. And it was that love in its rawest, most powerful form that saw them through.